It was a warm summer night on August 3rd, 2006, when, without warning, screams are heard echoing through the night. Robert E. Wone was spending the night at a friend's house when he was removed from this mortal coil. 3 others were in that house, but there were no witnesses. They are either unable to answer or perhaps unwilling to answer the question. Whatever happened to Robert Wone? This is Night Owl. Welcome back, my law-abiding citizens. I'm Ted, your host, and this is Night Owl. Tonight, we are off to Washington, D.C., the capital of the states. It was also the location of the most disturbing of crimes. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Ted, you run a true crime channel. Aren't they all pretty disturbing? Well, yes they are, but this one might be even more so. Tonight, we're looking into the case of Robert E. Wone, a 32-year-old lawyer from Oakton, Virginia, a 4th-generation Chinese-American. He graduated from Xaverian High School as the valedictorian. After grad, he went to the College of William and Mary as a James Monroe Scholar. Once there, he met a dude named Joseph Prince. Joseph was actually a senior, but Robert and Joseph became quick friends. There were actually quite a few school activities they took part in together, like the Honor Society, and they both even took leadership roles in the government of the school. Once Joseph graduated in 1993, he and Robert still maintained a friendship. Then, in 1996, he himself graduated from William and Mary College with honors. He, of course, continued on with his education and in 1999 graduated from the University of Pennsylvania Law School. He then went on to serve as a law clerk for Judge Raymond A. Jackson. Then, later on, Robert got himself a job as a lawyer with the firm of Covington and Burling. There, he mostly dealt with real estate law, of course. Part of this firm came with some public service responsibilities. In Robert's case, he became involved with the Organization of Chinese Americans as general counsel. Now, his life wasn't exactly focused on just his job alone. He also pursued love. After all, like the old line says, what good is all the riches in the world if you have no one to share it with? And Robert did indeed find true love. And on June 7, 2003, Robert married Catherine Ellen Yu. Then in 2006, he resigned from Covington and Burling. He then was hired by a company called Radio Free Asia, where he worked as general counsel. In fact, he was even the president of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association. Now, as you can probably guess, Robert had an absolutely brilliant future ahead of him. But, unfortunately, his future was cut short on August 2nd, 2006, when he was unalived by someone else's hands. You see, at this time, as already stated, he was working in Washington, D.C., and on the 2nd, he had a rather late night at work. But he was already prepared for this, because he knew that particular day was going to be a late one. He had already arranged accommodations for the night. He had it all set up for him to stay at a friend's place for the night. I mean, it did make sense. This friend of his only lived like a mile away from Robert's office. And who is this friend? It was his old college buddy, Joseph Price. Joseph owned this place with his life partner Victor Zaborski at 1509 Swan Street in Washington, D.C. And they also had a roommate, a dude named Dylan Ward, and the 3 of them were in a polyamorous relationship. Anyway, Robert arrived there at around 10:30 at night. At some point after that, Robert was unalived. And what was used? Something very sharp. The cops said that Robert was tied up, incapacitated, and even SA'd. Oh my God, that poor man. The neighbors heard a scream during the night at some time between 11 and 11:35 at night. But the thing is, that scream didn't come from Robert. It actually came from Victor. It was, however, Victor who called 911 at about 11:49 p.m. And around 5 minutes after that is when the paramedics showed up and the police shortly after that. The paramedics transported Robert to the hospital, but unfortunately, he was pronounced DOA at about 12:24 a.m. on August 3rd. Joseph informed Robert's wife of her beloved husband's passing. When the paramedics arrived, they were kind of put off by the behavior of Joseph, Victor, and Dylan. Now, when I say that, I don't mean they were acting all hysterical and stuff. Actually, it was quite the opposite. The paramedics thought they were acting way too calm under the circumstances. I mean, here is their friend, apparently, he just passed away, and there was no one screaming or even shedding a bloody tear. That just sort of struck them as odd. Do you know what? I have to agree with the paramedics. That is pretty weird. And naturally, those three were the main suspects right from the jump. I mean, they were the only other people in the house. Of course, all three of them had said that it had to be done by an unknown intruder. Investigators spent more than 3 weeks checking out Joseph's and Victor's house, and I gotta tell you, they removed a lot. I mean, they removed flooring, pieces of walls, a chunk of staircase, the washing machine, even sink traps. Wow, I'm a little surprised the house is still standing after all that. There was something that investigators seemed to notice, though. It did seem that the crime scene was tampered with, particularly the area underneath Robert's body. It looked like it had been cleaned. Now, originally, all three residents of the house agreed to talk to the cops without the benefit of having a lawyer present, even allowing themselves to be recorded at this time, which of course was used in court later on. During the interview with the police, all three men denied having anything to do with the crime. They were also asked if any of them had had any kind of physical relationship with Robert. They denied that as well, and all of his friends and family all said that Robert was both straight and a happily married man. Now, did the police arrest any of them? No, at least not yet. In fact, all three of these men attended Robert's funeral. Joseph was even a pallbearer. Then, about 3 months after Robert's passing, Joseph's place was broken into by 2 individuals, and one of those individuals was Joseph's own brother named Michael. They stole around $7,000 worth of electronics, but they got busted for it. Of course, later on, all the charges were dropped. What's funny is, the police claimed that they were getting themselves ready to make an arrest in Robert's case, but they said the burglary prevented them from making an arrest. Okay, I have a question then. Why? What would one have to do with the other? I mean, I could understand if some of that electronics they try to steal had information on it or evidence. But if you guys were getting set to arrest someone for what they allegedly did to Robert, then wouldn't you already have the evidence? I'm sorry, to me it sounds more like an excuse to cover up why there's been no progress made. And I guess I'm not the only one that sees their progress somewhat lacking. So did Katie, Robert's widow. In August 2007, she reported her frustration in an interview with the Washington Post. She told him that, and I quote,
"It has been trying at times as we continue to wait for the FBI to complete their analysis of all the samples that were taken."
In fact, during the space of a single year, the U.S. Attorney's Office transferred Robert's case 3 different times to 3 different lawyers. When this happens to a case, they give it what's called a vagabond status. Now, I'm assuming that's because it drifts around from lawyer to lawyer. But for Katie, she grew so frustrated, she even retained the services of a lawyer named Holder. On the first anniversary of Robert's passing, Katie held a press conference where she pleaded for the assistance from the public for any additional information they may have. At this press conference, her lawyer also pleaded for assistance. But in his case, the ones he was pleading with were 3 individuals in particular. He actually pled with Joseph, Victor, and Dylan. He said,
"You need to ask yourself, have I provided police with all the information I know?"
Now, that's not to say that the case made no progress, because it did. In fact, in October 2008, they actually made their first arrest in the case. They actually arrested and charged Dylan Ward with obstruction. And approximately a month later, they arrested Joseph and Victor and charged them with the same offense. Now, they weren't actually held while they waited for trial, but they had to wear an electronic monitoring device, and they had a curfew. And on December 19th, 2008, all 3 of the dudes got slapped with an additional charge of conspiracy. During that hearing, however, they ended the whole electronic monitoring and curfew thing. But the prosecutors did say they were reserving the right of charging them in the future with tampering with the evidence. In the affidavit that the authorities presented, it accused the 3 men of lying to the cops. It went on to say that Robert was tied up, incapacitated, essayed, and unalived inside 1509 Swan Street. And there's tons of evidence, which goes way beyond mere probable cause, which showed the 3 men obstructed justice by altering the crime scene, planting evidence, by delaying a call to 911, and by lying to the cops. The lawyers for the 3 men pretty much said the affidavit was just BS, And the reason the affidavit was released publicly was in hopes of turning the three men against each other. Their lawyers claimed that that was because prosecution had no real evidence and they required a witness. The prosecution believed that a knife was taken from the kitchen and disguised as the weapon that was used and left next to Robert's body. But they also say that a knife was missing from a set that was kept in Dylan's room. And that knife was more consistent with the wounds that Robert suffered. When they did an autopsy, they discovered that in some kind of degree suffocation played a role. And when they checked Robert's blood, they actually found no toxins present. One of the reasons investigators thought that he was injected with something was because there seemed to be a lack of struggle. And I kind of understand that. I mean, if someone's trying to unalive you, you'll probably fight like hell for your very life. They also use cadaver dogs, and these dogs did their jobs. They in fact got a couple hits. One was out by the patio drain, which would seem to indicate that someone washed themselves off outside on the patio. And the second hit was actually the lint trap in the dryer, which would seem to indicate that someone used it to dry off their clothes and that these clothes had some kind of human remains on them. But for whatever reason, the detectives just did not follow up on those two hits. When it comes to some of the other evidence against Joseph, Victor, and Dylan, even to me it does seem like the defense was grasping at straws a bit. I mean, don't get me wrong. It sounds like they do have some pretty good evidence, even if most of it is circumstantial. But when we start bringing up stuff like how Joseph signed up on a website called alt.com, which is a website for people that's interested in the S&M lifestyle, then even I sit back and I ask myself, what's that got to do with anything? In the end, Judge Lynn Leibovitz found all three men not guilty of all charges. She then spent about an hour on the bench explaining why she came to that judgment. She said that personally she believes that these three guys knew who did it, but she was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt these three men committed the offenses they were charged with. And you know what? I totally get it. I mean, you could know in your heart of hearts that someone is as guilty as sin, but that doesn't mean a thing if you can't prove it. And all that truly matters in a courtroom is what you can and cannot prove. However, I should point out Joseph's, Victor's, and Dylan's legal woes wasn't exactly over. You see, after their criminal trial was done, Robert's widow filed a civil suit against the three men, pretty much claiming that they didn't do anything to save her husband and that they were responsible for Robert's passing. The suit was settled outside of court for an undisclosed amount. As for the three men that were accused, well, for them life went on. Joseph and Victor are still together, and they moved to Miami. And Dylan, well, he became a Pilates instructor in Fort Lauderdale. As for Robert's legacy, there were several organizations and schools that started scholarships in his name. I've always liked that, you know? It's almost like you've granted someone immortality. On the 11th of October 2011, families and friends all gathered at Barksdale Field at the College of William and Mary, one of the schools that Robert graduated from, for the unveiling of 2 benches and 2 Chinese pistache trees that were dedicated in Robert's name. The plaques along the benches read, "Rest a while and enjoy the wonderful world around you." That was a quote from one of Robert's favorite movies, It's a Wonderful Life. It's important to remember that yes, this case has been unsolved for a number of years, but that doesn't mean it won't be solved. All it takes is for one person to come forward with some new information on this case. Maybe even from someone out there that's watching this video right now. So if anyone does know anything, then please, don't keep it to yourself. Call the Washington, D.C. Police Department at 202-673-6815. Remember, the tip that you give might be the one to take an unsolved case and make it a solved case. Robert was a lawyer, but he was also so much more than that. He was a loving husband and the loyal friend to everyone that knew him. And he thought he had a loyal friend that ended up in one way or another, betraying him either through action or inaction. And it is they that will have to live with what they did do or what they didn't do. Perhaps one day one of them will come totally clean and reveal what truly happened to cause such a nightmare to spring forth at 1509 Swan Street, Washington, D.C. But what do you think? Do you think that Robert's friends had something to do with it? Or do you think they had everything to do with it? Or do you think that it's like the three of them have always claimed? That they had nothing to do with it and it was just some random intruder? Let me know what you think in the comments, please. And as always, please remember to hit like, subscribe, and to share this video. It really does help me out. Until next time, remember, be you good or be you wicked, everyone deserves justice. Good night.